Spanish colonization. The Spaniard had been exploring the Philippines since the early 16th century. Ferdinand Magellan, a Portuguese, landed in Cebu in March 1521. He attempted to conquer the islands, but he was defeated and killed by Lapu-Lapu at the Battle of Mactan. Ferdinand Magellan sighted the Samar Island on March 16, 1521, and landed the next day on Homonhon Island in eastern Samar. So the Spanish colonization began on November 1564, and a Spanish expedition of 500 men led by Miguel Lopez de Legazpi and arrived at Cebu on February 13, 1565. So the Spanish viewed the Philippines as a stepping stone to the riches of the East Indies Spice Island. They discovered that the Philippines can be a way to their route. So Miguel Lopez de Legazpi established the first permanent settlement in Cebu. Spanish rule created the first unified political structure known as the Philippines. Spanish colonial rule saw the introduction of Christianity, the Code of Law, and the oldest modern university in Asia. The Philippines was ruled under the Mexico. After this, the colony was directly governed by Spain. Spanish rule ended in 1898 with Spain defeat in the America and Spanish War. The Philippines then became a territory of the United States. U.S. forces suppressed a Philippine Revolution led by Emilio Aguinaldo. The Spanish colonization ended on August 13, 1898, during the Battle of Mactan. Americans took control of the city. In December 1898, the Treaty of Paris was signed, ending the Spanish-American War in selling the Philippines to United States for $20 million. With this treaty, the Spanish rule in the Philippines was formally ended.
The Partition of Manila was an episode in Philippine colonial history when the British Empire occupied the Spanish colonial capital of Manila and the nearby principal port of Cavite for 20 months between 1762 and 1764. The occupation was an extension of the larger 7 Years' War between Britain and France, but which came to involve Spain. Admiral Samuel Cornish and General William Draper led the British colonization in the Philippines. The British expedition had 13 ships and 6,830 men. On September 22, 1762, the British entered the Manila Bay. September 23, 1762, they presented a demand for the surrender of the city to the Spanish governor Archbishop Manuel Rojo. October 5, the fierce fighting began in the street of Intramuros. To put a stop, Archbishop Rojo raised a white flag as a sign of surrender. The same day, the Manila fell to the British invaders. October 6, Spanish authorities signed the terms of surrender. The three governor-generals who played a role during the war are Alexander Dalrymple, a British governor, Archbishop Antonio Manuel Rojo, acting Spanish governor-general, Simon de Anda, rebel governor. The British wanted to use Manila as a warehouse for trade in the region, particularly with China. The British occupation of Manila lasted until Manila was returned to Spain according to the 1763 Treaty of Paris. The European big powers signed the Treaty of Paris on February 10, 1763. The terms of the Treaty of Paris were harsh to losing France. All French territory on the mainland of North America was lost. The British received Quebec and the Ohio Valley. The port of New Orleans and the Louisiana Territory west of the Mississippi were ceded to Spain for their efforts as a British ally. Historical values of the British invasion. They opened the Philippines into the outside world. They allowed direct trade from China, India, and other countries. Indian rupee circulated in Manila, and for the first time, Europeans looked at the maps and found that Manila is the capital of the Philippines.
The German colonization. The German squadron is arrived in Manila and engaged in maneuvers which Commodore George Dewey, seeing this as obstruction of his bloc, offered war, after which the German backed down. George Dewey was born on December 26, 1837. During the Civil War, he served with Admiral Farragut in the Battle of New Orleans and as a part of Atlantic Bloc. The Battle of Manila Bay took place on May 1, 1898, the following outbreak of the Spanish War. The German Emperor expected an American defeat with the Spain left in the sufficient weak position for the revolutionaries to capture Manila, leaving in the Philippines ripe for the German picking. German settlement in the Philippines began during the Spanish colonization of the Philippines, when the German emperors attempted to acquire the country. The Philippines and the Far East were brought to the attention of the world, and Germany recognized the great potentialities of islands as a major commercial market. On June 12, the Philippines declared its independence from Spain. Vice Admiral Otto von Dietrich arrived in Manila Bay. German interest in the Philippines was cut short with the signing of Treaty of Paris on December 10, 18.
The Japanese occupation of the Philippines between 1942 and 1945. On December 8, 1941, Japan invaded the Philippines. Clark Air Base in Pampanga, where the main force of U.S. where warplanes are based. Baguio City and other adjoining provinces were bombed by Japanese airplanes, completely destroying the U.S. Air Base. Then on December 22, General Douglas MacArthur declared Manila an open city on the advice of Commonwealth President Manuel L. Quezon to avoid its destruction. Manila was occupied by the Japanese on January 2, 1942. MacArthur retreated with his troops to Bataan while the Commonwealth government withdrew to Corregidor Island before proceeding to the United States. The joint American and Filipino soldiers in Bataan finally surrendered on April 9, 1942. MacArthur escaped to Corregidor, then proceeded to Australia. The 76,000 captured soldiers were forced to embark on the infamous Death March to a prison camp more than 100 kilometers north. An estimated 10,000 prisoners died due to thirst, hunger, and exhaustion. For more than 3 years, Filipino and American forces who escaped from Bataan and Corregidor organized themselves into guerrilla forces to fight the Japanese invaders. A highly effective guerrilla campaign by Philippine resistance forces controlled 60% of the islands, mostly jungle and mountain areas. MacArthur supplied them by submarine and sent reinforcements and officers. MacArthur made a good on his promise of "I shall return" when the Allied forces he led made a historic landing on Leyte Island on October 20, 1944, and liberated the Philippines from the clutches of the Japanese invaders.
President William McKinley issued a proclamation of benevolent assimilation for the mild sway of justice and right for arbitrary rule. Theodore Roosevelt, who had succeeded to the U.S. presidency after the assassination of President McKinley, proclaimed an amnesty to those who had participated in the conflict. Ethel Stephen Otis was a United States Army general who served in the American Civil War, Spanish-American War, and Philippine-American War. Arthur MacArthur Jr. He became the military governor-general when the Americans occupied the Philippines in the 1900s. Wesley Merritt was an American major general who served in the cavalry of the United States. He became the first American military governor of the Philippines. Lloyd Wheaton was a United States general who fought in the Philippine-American War and in the Union Army during the American Civil War. Thomas Anderson was a career officer in the United States Army who served as a general in the Spanish-American War and the Philippine-American War. Joseph Wheeler was an American military commander and politician. He is also a general in the United States during both the Spanish-American War and the Philippine-American War. Jacob Smith was a United States Army officer notorious for ordering an indiscriminate retaliatory attack on a group of Filipinos during the Philippine-American War. Henry Lawton was a U.S. Army officer who served with the distinction in the Civil War. He is the only officer to be killed during the Philippine-American War. Frederick N. Funston. He received the Medal of Honor for his actions during the Philippine-American War. Leonard Wood was a United States Army Major General. He commanded the Rough Riders with Theodore Roosevelt as his second-in-command. Adnat Chafee was a Lieutenant General in the United States Army. Chafee took part in the American Civil War and in the Spanish-American War. Peyton Conway March was a United States Army officer who served as Chief of Staff of the United States Army from 1918 until 1921. Luther Hare participated in the Spanish-American War and Philippine-American War, notably in the recovery of captured U.S. forces following the Battle of Pulang Lupa.
The Philippines have experienced brutality and slavery from its history prior to various countries' expedition and colonization. However, after all the slavery and abuses that the Filipinos have endured, there are these people we call heroes who fought for the Filipinos' freedom and the country's independence, which they truly believe that all innocent people deserve to be spared. There are organizations led by these famous people at the present, left their remarkable memories and patriotic actions, fighting against those countries that look down on the Filipinos, seeking freedom and independence for the Philippines. After all the wars, by the help of the Americans by providing various laws appointing the country's independence, the Philippines was freed from invaders and currently living as a democratic country, which are led by different leaders as years pass by. Now, the country is enjoying the freedom that has been granted and is led by a leader, President Rodrigo Duterte, chosen by majority of the Filipino voters whom they thought deserved to rule and whom they believe that would continue fighting and doing anything that the country and its countrymen deserve. Philippines, once a lowly country, now a free and a truly wonderful island.